Did you think that we were done with the lore dumps? Oh, you silly fool, it is just the beginning. We are in the setup stage of storytelling right now, meaning that we are in a place of getting lots of exposition that we will have context for in upcoming story events. The only issue here is remembering all of it, since this is a chapter that came out in August of 2016, and we haven't had any callbacks to it yet. Hiatus is a son of a bitch. Now, as far as the exposition itself, I think it works well and doesn't feel too heavy-handed. It all flows naturally from what the characters are talking about, and we finally reached an area of peace and calmness for Guts and his crew, and it's honestly really nice to see. There are admittedly a lot of gripes about the Elf Island chapters, in particular the lack of action, but I think it really comes down to the hiatus of all things. Were it not the case and you weren't waiting months on end for chapters, I don't think people would care as much. I love the calm and quiet moments of Berserk, and normally those are my favorites. The chapters like Wounds, Bonfire of Dreams, Bubbles of Futility, all of these chapters peak at my top favorite, and they all are the slower, more character-building moments. The issue is you have a human specimen like Guts, jacked to Kenshiro levels proportion, dressed in black and wielding a gigantic sword in a world of demons, and, well, people want to see action with that, and I totally get it. And if you wait 5 to 6 months for a chapter and get more dialogue or a Griffith chapter or Isidro goofing off, I can completely understand why that annoys you. But my reply would be, think about Berserk in the bigger picture. Don't think about it as a single chapter, think of the entire story as a whole. How wonderful is it that Guts has painstakingly made his way to his destination, and he is now allowed a little bit of rest, recuperation, and reflection. Not to mention, this entire journey has not been for him, it's been for the woman that he loves. Sacrifice. Not in sacrificing others for his own ambition, but sacrificing himself for the love of another. It's a beautiful sentiment at its very core, but I'm getting off track of what we were talking about. Oh yeah, more lore. Elementals. You remember those, right? Tiny little spirits that work to move and manipulate matter. Earth, water, fire, and wind. Sylphs that are in Serpico's sword, salamanders that are in Isidro's daggers, undines for water, and gnomes for earth. Well, in this chapter, we learn that there is actually a fifth elemental that ties all of these together, that grounds and pulls them into a unity. These are called Barretts, weight elementals. Apparently they are so small they can't even really be tapped into or manipulated by magic, and within this forest of Elfhelm, very few exist, which kind of lightens the gravity and allows Isidro to jump high into a tree. So you can very much say that Barretts are like a binding element, tying everything into one whole. Gedfring also mentions that Barretts, when coming together in a high quantity, can do things like darken the sky. Where have we seen that before? Actually, where have we seen complete darkness manifest into a being? Yeah, I'll get to that in a moment. The most interesting thing he says to me, though, is that the Barretts can cause things like depression and obsession within the mind. Again, where have we seen this before? So can it be assumed that Guts' trauma and rage and conjuring of negative emotions caused an influx of Barretts within him, manifesting itself into the Beast of Darkness? This is just a theory based on the information here, because I don't want to say that the Beast of Darkness is something outside of Guts. I think that would take away from the importance of what it's meant to represent. But when you think about how negative emotions and energy work to begin with, it very much does feel like a swelling of darkness overtaking you. Have you ever been really irritated and lashed out at someone, and then later on you calmed down and you thought, what was that? Was that really me? Did I really say those things? Almost like a literal demonic energy had been taken over your body for just a moment. I feel like similar ideas can be applied to Berserk, Guts' trauma and the Beast of Darkness, as well as Griffith's obsession with getting his kingdom, dwell from a dark place within themselves. Barretts just gives a name to that dark energy, but it doesn't take away from it being within the person themselves. Now let's shift this over to the God Hand. If one were to exist and thrive within that energy, you could have a grounding and binding force of nature that deliberately dwells and shares in that negativity. Void, the God Hand that binds the other four together, just as the fifth elemental ties in the other four elementals. Look, I don't know if this is what Miura is trying to get at, and I'm taking a lot of speculation from just one line of dialogue, But I do think the deliberate setup and introduction of Barrett's directly relates to information about Void, not trying to jump ahead or anything, but we will soon get a glimpse into the past, showcasing the God Hand once more. And I think Miura is giving us a tiny piece of the puzzle along the way. The Chich story, the spirit trees, the weight elementals, it's all meant to come into play later. We have to take this information, rattle it around, and prepare for the storm. In the meantime, we get more elves. Pick, Peck, Pook, and Poke. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about them. As well, we get this amazing double-page spread of Guts and the crew walking through the Elfhelm forest and being witnessed by dozens of magical creatures. Elves, fauns, brownies, ents, and who knows what else. There are also so many characters on this page. I would love for somebody to take a count and say how many that they found. Be crazy if Waldo showed up somewhere. He's also kind of magical, I think. The creatures all seem enthralled and interested in the human visitors, wanting to play and to dance, and whatever these wind creatures are, they're all up on Serpico. Nice. There's unicorns that are here, which remind me of the movie Legend, and it's super wholesome for sure. And it's very cool for Miura to show the other side of the non-human creatures, and that they aren't all just cave-dwelling, women-stealing trolls, and that there is a positive side to all this magic. It takes a girl, Danon, to blow on a horn in order to focus all of them and get back on track, leading the travelers to a gigantic cherry tree. More specifically, a spirit tree. You know, one of those things stopping the world tree from overlapping the worlds completely. This one is so gigantic and powerful, it's like a mountain. And I have to assume, at some point, Griffith and his crew would be looking to burn down this tree just like all the others. But also, because this tree is so large and resonates with so much power, I think it is a very special piece of the puzzle, and maybe the reason the God Hand haven't fully been able to manifest in the physical world just yet. Now, some people think that they have, and that we just haven't seen them yet, but the truth is nobody really knows. But we didn't just get a whole exposition on spirit trees in the last chapter to be shown this cherry tree the very next chapter and not assume it has something to do with the entire plan. This is storytelling, guys, come on. Anyway, they make their way inside the tree into a throne room, currently empty. That is until Puck flies onto it, declaring himself the Flower Storm Monarch. He then calls out Magnifico for conspiring to take the island and sell the elves, obviously something he could never actually accomplish, and they're both jokingly punished by the other elves, tying them up in vine handcuffs and taking them away. The joke plays out for a bit until Danon, the housekeeper who helped escort them, begins to remove her robes. And no, she's not trying to sell you her OnlyFans. She reveals herself to be a beautiful elf-like creature, though human-sized, and she's absolutely stunning, and her appearance and dress is reminiscent of the very cherry tree that they are inside of. You can imagine that they kept her identity a secret in order to observe and understand the travelers first. Everyone is floored by her transformation, and a sudden surge of comforting energy starts to resonate from her. She officially greets the travelers as her true self, the ruler of Elfhelm, the true Flower Storm Monarch. I mentioned in a video once that in the English translation, the ruler of Elfhelm up until this point was referred to as a king or as a he. You might think that this is a continuity error or a retcon, but it's not. The Japanese word that was used was sort of gender neutral, and the king of Elfhelm was first mentioned years before we got to this point. So you can't blame the translators for seeing the word king and then assuming it to be male. It's just one of those little things that we need to look back on and kind of ignore. Kind of like the whole Falcon, Hawk, Band of the Falcon, Band of the Hawk translation. It doesn't really matter in the end. Languages are funny like that. One thing I love that's subtle but also super sad to me is Guts seeing the Monarch reveal, then looking at Casca's infantile behavior, and then immediately going to speak to Danon. He is here for a mission, an objective, a purpose, and like the soldier within him, he wants to accomplish the task. Danon cuts him off, though, in order to enact punishment on Puck and Magnifico for conspiring to take the throne, and it's as light-hearted and playful as you can imagine in a place like this, as the only sentence they receive is to help the brownie creatures clean up for the rest of the day. After that, it's back to business as Danon declares that they may be able to revive Casca's mind by using the Corridor of Dreams. As such, Guts is especially relieved. To enact whatever this is, Danon tells only Farnese and Shurikei to come along with her, along with Casca. sensing the attachment Casca has towards Farnese and knowing Shirokei's magical skill. As Guts wishes to come along too, Danon halts him, saying that the fear that she senses within Casca towards him could hinder the ritual. This is devastating for Guts, as it's the beginning of him feeling, well, useless. His skills are combat, physical battle, and in a land of peace and magic, there is not much for him to contribute to. And when it comes to Casca, he has been her protector for so long. For her to be out of his sight that far and knowing that he is powerless to help, or not knowing if anything is going to go wrong, well, I imagine it's kind of like seeing a loved one go in for an important surgery. You're completely out of your element and can only wait and have faith in the people performing the operation. So what is the Corridor of Dreams? On one hand, it's exactly as it sounds. We enter the dreams of Casca. From there, Farnese and Shirokei are meant to decipher and interpret what they see and piece together Casca based on that information. But the warning that the dreams are, though similar to entering the astral world, are based upon the rules of the dreamer. We have learned a long time prior that dreams are a gateway into the astral world and the best way to communicate with people and even implant ideas. We've all seen how Griffith and the God Hand planted an Inception-style technique into humanity as a collective whole. During the Conviction arc, we got a chapter called Revelations that spoke about humanity having a dream of Midland being ravaged by plague and war, only to be drenched in darkness, and the only shining light coming from its prophesied savior, the Hawk of Light, implanting the idea that Griffith would come way before he came back into the world. We also had a scene where our boy, motherfucking Zod, was having a little sleepy time, and he encountered the embodiment of Griffith within his dream. Zod attacked, testing the might of who may become his superior, and lost that fight, losing one of his horns in the process. An attack that was able to wound on both an astral and physical level, and permanently removed his horn, and has been the only injury that Zod has been unable to regenerate from. This shows us that dreams and Berserk can be more than just dreams, gateways into people's subconscious, and things can have an effect from the dream world into the physical. If there are supposed to be three worlds that overlap in Berserk, the physical, astral, and idea worlds, I would say that the dreamscape is mostly linked to the idea world, that collective consciousness of all life that I often talk about. But even more so, perhaps dreams are what link all three worlds together in its truest sense. In a dream, the rules are based upon your own ego, and yet you are connected to others, and you have an awareness that goes beyond what your physical body can perceive. Add that to the fact that Berserk's themes often revolve around individuals' dreams of accomplishing something and finding oneself. We then have a lot of symbolism that we can plug into. But what does it all mean? I don't know. I think it just means that dreams are powerful and a way for us not only to perceive, but to be perceived, better than we ever could in the physical world. But then there's a big glaring issue that we also have to address, and that is magic. Magic was something that was very limited during the first half of the series, and ever since Griffith's return, Shirokei's introduction, and so forth, magic has become a bigger and bigger factor in the story. And just like all stories featuring any kind of powers or special abilities, you need to keep upping the ante in order to raise the stakes. The issue here is that Casca has a very realistic trauma that we need to address. She was raped and had her mind broken to a state of regression in that she now acts like a toddler. This is very serious stuff, and there's a psychological condition not quite like this, but similar, in the sense where people regress to a younger state of mind in order to find that comfort when they can't handle an intense trauma. This was a serious changing point in the story. It gave Guts motivation and an understanding that he needs to face the sadness that he experienced, as well as the darkness within himself. And Casca has been in this regressed state much longer than she was ever in her true self in the manga. So, after all this time of having her like this, and the impact that it has made to the story, to all of a sudden say, hey, we can fix this with magic, it becomes a little bit of a rocky area. Some may say that it takes away from the importance of that trauma if it can just be fixed so easily by superpowers and not by any sort of emotional reflection on Casca's part. People want to see her strength and see her push through this as Guts pushed through his as his Black Swordsman persona. To do it in a natural and grounded way, And I completely understand that sentiment. But the dreamscape sequence in Berserk, I think, does a very good job at mixing these two equations. Because yes, they are using fantasy/magic type solutions to this problem, but we are also delving into and focusing on key events in Casca's life and what they mean to her. We are exploring her mind from the point of view of other characters, and will literally be piecing together different aspects of Casca's character. And by the end of it, it won't be a perfect fix. There are still things for her to overcome, but this gets the ball rolling. It puts us into a place of understanding, and expectation is still yet to be met. So I don't know, are we too far into the fantasy genre now that magic can just solve everything? And what stakes can we expect if that's the case? How exhilarating is it to see Guts swing a sword now that there are characters that can alter minds and change the weather on a whim? They're good questions to ask. But regardless of what you think about it, this is where we are now. And as we enter into the dream world, we see Shurike's dream of how she envisions Isidro as a literal monkey, and she makes her way into Farnice's dream, where she's using a stone that looks like Mozgus's head in order to wash everyone's clothes, being the caretaker that she is. And from there, the two venture into Casca's dream, starting at first with some comical drawings of what Casca's regressed mind must envision the team as, a very surface-level dream, and then they follow the guiding petals into her mind, where we get an amazing page turn showing us a clear image of the eclipse, the truth buried deep within her subconscious. That truth leads the girls into a barren wasteland of death, flags planted all around, most likely representing the monsters that killed the Band of the Hawk, and how Casca envisions Guts and herself within this nightmare world is Guts is here as a broken and wounded hound, a shade of his beast of darkness, and a shade of the mad dog that she used to call him. Here looking like he's gotten the shit kicked out of him, stabbed, and tied around his neck as a chain, dragging a casket with the Band of the Hawk crest upon it. So even if Casca on a surface level fears Guts, deep down her true self does at least recognize the brutal reality of how he's been carrying the deaths upon his shoulders. For better or worse, Guts has taken the responsibility and is unable to let go of it, no matter how wounded he becomes. The flags begin to take life, turning into flying demonic creatures that attack and stab the Guts hound, as well as the casket. Casca understanding how often Guts is attacked and forced to fight back. But this time, Shurike and Farnice are here within the dream, and they are actually able to physically help the Guts hound, warding off the creatures. Now remember, we are in a dream, so these creatures aren't technically real per se, they are manifestations. But just like Danon says, the dreamer makes the rules, and just like every Freddy Krueger movie that I ever saw, the threats are still real. The mind overcomes all things, and if it believes the danger is real and can hurt, then so it will be. As Shurike and Farnice inspect the hound and the casket, they conclude that this is her representation of Guts. As well, inside the casket is a broken doll representing Casca herself, broken to pieces just as her mind has been since that day. The only thing moving is a small little chibi version of Casca, acting just like her typical toddler self in the real world. From moving around a lot to being comforted by Farnice, going right towards her, sort of like a pet to its master. It's like the only part of Casca that has an awareness. And from here, their mission becomes very clear. Shurike and Farnice must travel the barren landscape of Casca's repressed memories and try to put the doll back together, following a path of petals that's contributed by Danon to help lead them to the areas of her mind where they need to go. Personally, I love the idea of this. I love the setup, and particularly I love that it's Shurike and Farnice that have to do this. I do like that Guts is unable to help, both because of what it does for his character feeling helpless, and it also gives the other characters time to shine in an adventure that doesn't involve Guts being able to help. Well, at least not the actual Guts. Casca's manifestation of Guts is another story. The entire dreamscape scenario will dive into both fantasy action and serious topics regarding the specific type of trauma Casca is facing, and we are going to get one of the most satisfying revivals I've read in any manga. So please, I hope you come back for the next episode of this analysis series, because Casca, after 22 years in the manga releases, will finally return. Thank you a lot for watching this video, guys. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think of my analysis down below. Leave a comment, like the video if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description for all of my social media, Patreon, Discord, and all that fun stuff. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you in the next video.